It's only entertainment.
Welcome back to The Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we got Debra Borchardt. She's a co-founder, executive editor at Green Market Report. Debra, thanks for being with us at The Talking Hedge.
Well, Josh, thanks for inviting me.
Appreciate it. So the Green Market Report, if you don't know, financial news source that covers the cannabis industry, provides investors and businesses with the information they need to make informed decisions about the cannabis market. So I kind of want to just jump right into it, Debra, and follow up on one of the bigger stories from last year in the cannabis financial world, which was MSOs not paying federal taxes in North America, Canada included. So at 6% interest, is that just considered a cheap loan, or are they finally paying up?
Well, that's an excellent question, because the strategy had been to push that payment out. We know a lot of these cannabis companies have been strapped for cash and have had some pretty challenging capital environments. So rather than pushing that money to the government, a lot of them thought, well, we'll just sit on it for now until things get better. And that strategy, for the most part has worked. The government hasn't really leaned on them to give much money. Some have been paying quite a lot in taxes. If you've heard any of Kim Rivers' commentary, she's often quoted as saying she has spent something like $230 million on taxes. But that was definitely a strategy that a lot of them pursued, which was, we'll kick the can until a better day. And so far, that strategy has worked out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, better way to get it from somewhere than nowhere, I guess. Free loan.
Conserving capital, and if they're not going to shut you down for paying your taxes late, or if there could potentially be a chance that some kind of legislation would be passed where they could get those past taxes, waived or something along those lines, it's going to be a whole lot easier to wait and see how the market plays out and then pay that money versus paying a whole bunch of money and then maybe trying to claw it back if things change, because that would be a lot harder to claw it back.
Right. Decent strategy. When life gives you lemons, make lemon haze lemonade.
Well, and to learn how to work the system. So
yeah. I love loopholes. I do. Well, so switching gears on a different story, I saw something crazy last year about cocaine. So there's something, you had a story about Power Leaves is changing the tune on coca leaves. So my limited understanding on that was there was a maybe cannabis company up there that filed a patent and they didn't know what it was. And so the Canadian authorities agreed to approve it. And then they found out that the process was creating synthetic cocaine. Can you explain that? Because I probably am not getting that right. And why are we talking about coca leaves?
Right. So, and it's very interesting. Yes. I think that as cannabis got somewhat legalized in the US and in Canada, and then psychedelics started getting a lot of attention, it seemed that the different businesses started to expand that net. So if we've started to look at MDMA, DMT, LSD, and considering those compounds for true medical treatments, psilocybin, obviously one of them, it kind of started to expand that net of compounds that might have had a certain stigma attached to them that maybe because of that stigma weren't fully explored. And I think that as a part of that, coca leaves has started to come into the equation. But there's kind of two paths in this particular compound. One of them are companies that have applied for this dealer's license through Health Canada. And to your point, it seemed to have gotten approved. And then the headlines went crazy. And so people started to kind of misunderstand that these companies were going to now sell cocaine in a dispensary. And that was not it at all. But it would have been a controlled substance, a la, cannabis, that would only be sold to researchers, hospitals, just other licensed professionals. And then what's interesting, obviously, is cannabis is Schedule 1 in the US. Cocaine's only Schedule 2. So crazy. But so the idea was, well, if we could do this with cannabis, why not? Let's explore other options for the use of the coca leaf. Now, Power Leaves is kind of gone a completely different path on that. They're not looking at this for medical purposes. They're looking at it more like Coca-Cola, like a coca leaf extract that would be used for beverages. So as I was doing the research on these different cocaine-related companies, Coca-Cola has basically a monopoly in the United States on the use of coca leaves for flavor and as an additive for their beverages.
And
But
most
what
people don't know that they still do that. And most people have no clue, but they import a ton of coca leaves. And I think the DEA takes the cocaine out of it and then gives them the leaf or something like that.
Yeah, decocainization, something like that. Yeah. They basically strip out the stimulant of it. And so you're just left with the plant flavoring. And the people in South America that have known this plant for a long time, you'll hear stories about how they chew the leaves and they get health benefits, and a lot of the indigenous tribes use them for medical benefits. And so Power Leaves is not trying to pursue this as a drug type thing. They're pursuing it as purely an additive to a beverage or to foods for the flavoring and for some of the softer stimulant effect of it, which is kind of what you've got with Coca-Cola. But they're importing the extract. They're not importing the actual leaf. The extract process is taking place in South America for them. So it's just very interesting that all of a sudden in this last year, we've started to see this expansion of what are we, thinking about this product. A lot of people, and I would argue that there's probably more stigma around cocaine than LSD, because a lot of people probably have close connections to very negative stories about whether a family member or friend who got addicted to this product, very highly addictive and destructive. And then, God forbid, you start to throw in the crack extension of cocaine, and you really have some bad stuff happening with this compound. And so it's a big re-education process to try to re-educate the market around this plant and the good part of it versus the bad part of it.
Yeah, I think it's a completely different clientele, which is probably why the Cannabumps product didn't sell well. I haven't heard anything about it. Most terrible product I've ever seen in the cannabis industry. I have no idea who they are and don't ever want to meet them. But speaking of another terrible situation, staying in Canada, is Tilray and Hexo. So want to see if you had any input on that. We've got Hexo, who had a lot of automation. I thought that they were going to go places, and yet they kind of tied themselves to this zombie that is Tilray. That, Brandon Kennedy came out and said, we don't come from cannabis, we're CPG, we're gonna rock this world. And then now he can't even sell his products. Tilray rather can't even sell their products to soccer moms. They're fleeing. They're looking for alternative products. So what happened with that? Is that the Time Warner AOL, debacle, that they thought it was going to be something and it's probably going to end up in bankruptcy, what it looks like?
Well, probably with Hexo. I mean, Hexo got loaded up with debt. I mean, they seemed like they were going down the correct path and that the company was fairly solid. And then, like a lot of cannabis companies, just the debt overwhelmed them and they kind of ran out of time. We've seen a lot of that lately with a lot of companies restructuring their debt. The lenders don't want to own a cannabis company. Most of them don't anyway. And so they've been very willing to push out maturities, renegotiate interest rate levels. So we've seen a lot of that. With Tilray, you can never count them out. I think because of their size, I think that they'll probably be one of those companies that will probably continue to move along and continue to operate.
It does take capital to try and scale and expand, but you have to do it responsibly. Everyone's looking for money, right? You just wrote a story about how SEC accused High Times of securities fraud. They were looking for capital. They were going out and merging with other companies. They bought Dope Magazine for like 11 million and went out and made their acquisitions. Similar to,
Well, 11 million.
yeah, wasn't it 2 million in debt and the rest was in stock? 2 million in
Yeah, I
debt they
mean,
paid off.
that's what I was going to say is my understanding of the situation was that Dope was in, like we just said, in a debt situation and needed rescuing. And so High Times came to the rescue, took the debt on, but, and then paid them out in stock that basically is worthless. So it's just monopoly money.
Mm-hmm. What is it with that whole story? Because you would think that it's pretty black and white. We're highly regulated in the cannabis industry. Going public, it seems black and white to me. I was in the securities industry though, so it was
As was
ingrained.
I.
Yeah, yeah. So it was ingrained in us to be compliant. Like if you weren't, they were going to shackle you and throw you in some gulag somewhere, and you were going to do manual labor for the rest of your life. So I don't understand why somebody would be so arrogant and ignorant. Even David Tran, and I love the guy, he's from Seattle
Yeah,
too, but he's like, I'll give
David's
you the
great.
shirt on my back. I'll give you a free hat. Like you can't say any of those things, even if it's a joke. Like, what are you doing sitting there and not understanding the full compliance of what you're doing? You can't offer free stuff to, hey, the next person who buys my shares gets a free shirt off my back. Like those things are incredibly ignorant to say. So it doesn't surprise me at all that High Times is getting sued. But why did it take this long?
Well, the SEC moves slowly because these situations, they only have so many agents to investigate these situations. And from my experience reporting on them, it's usually a 3 to 5 year lag. So like the bad behavior happens, and then 3 to 5 years later, you start to see it bubble up at the SEC. That's why we're seeing a lot coming out of the SEC lately, because a lot of this stuff was happening in the 2018, 19, 20 era. And now it's finally coming to fruition, all their work. And you're right. I have a background on Wall Street. I worked at Bear Stearns for 15 years. I had all the securities licenses. The SEC has very specific rules with offering stock to the public. And to your point, they're very black and white what these rules are. There is a reason why you don't sell stock to unaccredited investors, because they don't know what they're doing and then they get suckered. And that's what happened with High Times. They're pushing out buy 5, what was it? You could buy 10 shares for $11, $550, and then they did a $420 promotion. So they're selling all this stock to people that are very small, uneducated investors. And I don't have any problem with people getting into the market. I think that's retail is an excellent place to start. And investing is a lot of fun and a great place to start. But they took money from people that really didn't know what they were doing, didn't really understand what they were doing. And in the beginning, that offering statement didn't have hardly any disclaimers. Later on, they added in, the stock may never trade, the stock may potentially go to zero. So that was added in later. But then what's interesting is with what the SEC is alleging is that they did a stock promotion that they didn't disclose. Now, you can promote stocks. You have to disclose it, though. You have to say, hey, we bought this ad selling green market report stock. If you say, I do an ad, buy green market report stock, but I don't tell the investors that I paid for that ad, that's when you get into trouble. It's very easy to go after people for this kind of stuff. And that's why I think that they went after High Times for that. My understanding, look from the emails I get from investors at High Times, they've told me that they called the SEC because they were upset. Mm-hmm. So if the SEC is getting phone calls from people going, I bought the stock, I'm upset, there's no customer service, I don't know what's going on, they're going to start to look into it. The company doesn't even have a transfer agent right now. And for the audience that doesn't know this, I'm sure Josh knows what this is is if I'm Green Market Report and I sold 100 shares, somewhere someone's keeping track of those stocks and who owns all those shares, and that's a transfer agent. And you pay that transfer agent to do your housekeeping, to keep track of the shares, who owns them, yada, yada. My understanding, they didn't pay the transfer agent. I don't have any proof of this. So I have not been able to write any kind of story about it. So this is just an alleged situation. But the shareholders I know have called the transfer agent that had been on record, and they've said, no, we're not holding this stock anymore. So even if they bought stock, who knows where it is? Who knows keeping track of it? There's nobody keeping track of this stuff. The sad part is, Josh, is they fined High Times over $500,000 for this bad behavior. And if they don't come up with the money, nothing really happens to them. They likely can't do another offering, which they probably wouldn't anyway. But that's about all that happens. So that it's a little frustrating from the shareholder point of view, because they get upset and they're angry and they want someone to be punished. But a lot of times people get away with it. That's the sad part.
Yeah, but it might put them on the auction block for somebody else to buy them out, or
they're already on the auction block.
Yeah.
They're already in a receivership. I know people that have reached out to the receiver and said that they wanted to buy assets. Some of these assets, I don't know what happened with that. As you know, High Times said that they were bought or going to be bought by Lucy Scientific Discovery, which hasn't filed their financials on time. So it's a pretty big mess.
Yeah, it's not that hard to get an investor relations firm on board to help you stay in compliance, and it blows my mind, this industry. Washington State, for example, we have 1,500 licenses, and there's only 3 dozen that have never been popped for a violation. And yet, these same companies think that they can handle a Schedule 3 when the majority of it is going to be, highly regulated, much, much more than they ever anticipated. So what impact do you think is going to have for rescheduling on the cannabis industry?
It's going to be pretty big.
I'm wondering how investors are going to approach it with rescheduling. Are there any specific sectors that might be more impacted or see growth from it?
That's a great question. I feel like some of these, and it's funny, I had this conversation with someone the other day about some of the ancillary businesses that did really well at the beginning of the cannabis industry emergence. So some of these tech companies that just focused on cannabis, because no one else would do it. I think that those companies are going to find that bigger companies will now be like, oh, I'm happy to come in now. And they're going to be pushed out of the way. We're already seeing stress in some of these compliance companies. To your point, that was pretty important for small startup cannabis companies in the beginning. But once you get your business started and going, you're going to know what new rules and regs come down the pipe. If you're in Connecticut, if you're in Massachusetts, whatever, do you need to keep paying for this compliance company? Probably not. Do you need to keep paying for a mapping company to tell you where a dispensary is? You can go on Google now. Don't need that. So I feel like some of these businesses that started out with a need to fill in the beginning, that need isn't going to be there. And I also think that, bigger, more mainstream companies will start to step in.
Yeah, we're also seeing a lot of that outsourcing kind of come back. The people working from home or getting people from other countries. You're seeing a lot of I'm at least seeing a lot of insourcing, people that are hiring rather than outsourcing. I'm wondering if people are using technology though to get around that as well. So I went to ChatGPT and I looked at a Green Market Report, got some slogans that AI put together. And artificial intelligence came up with some slogans for you. It said the Green Market Report, where the money meets the weed. Another one was stocks, bonds, and bongs. Our financial forecast is lit.
Cringe. They're all so cringy.
Yeah. Hey, here's another one. Money grows on trees. We'll cover every branch. Yeah. So I try to make it
Okay.
funny, but that's robotic humor. Having said that, what role does artificial intelligence and technology play in the cannabis financial services or industry at large?
Gosh, I just don't see much of it. I think AI is great for some things. I use it, a lot of times when I'm crafting emails that are kind of markety. I find it's really helpful for that. But it can't write a story. It can't do analysis. Um, it can only scrape what's already out there. And so but having said that, from my point of view, that's where I stand. But I could see if you're potentially someone dealing with strains and things of that nature, if you had a special AI program that could maybe say, hey, this has been really popular, that's been really popular, and churn out and spit out what would be something, maybe a new strain that people hadn't considered that could be very popular. I could see that would be pretty strong.
Yeah. Is there anything that's innovative that you've seen? Innovative financial products or services or anything that's emerging in the cannabis industry? I feel like there's been a real lack of innovation. We used to see, little gadgets. What is this? The toker poker, like we don't even see like little gadgets anymore. Like what happened to innovation? What are some things that you're seeing?
I think it just became, I know what you mean. I think it became standardization because, like, yeah, you're right. I used to get these super cool little vape trinket type things that were really cool. But then when I would try to go and get a new vape cartridge for this very specific vape, it was very hard.
Oh, yeah.
Vapes are problematic. They're expensive. They often quit working quickly. It's like I just bought this $60 vape and 2 weeks later I can literally see the oil in there, but it's stuck, it's clogged up, it doesn't work.
Or I'm on vacation and I'm Googling how to get it to work because I can't buy it anywhere I'm at. And I'm on this YouTube video and it's like, you got to put this metal thing in this little thing to get it to connect to this other thing. And then I got it to work and I gave the guy a thumbs up. But like, do I need to deal with that?
And that's certainly, to me, that's where we could see innovation. I feel like the most innovation we've really seen has probably been on the beverage side, where in the beginning, cannabis beverages were just absolutely disgusting, and they were just
oil
gross.
on the rim. It wasn't homogenized.
It tasted like bong water, quite honestly. It was nasty. And now with the innovations, you've got seltzers that taste equal to any seltzer in the market, in the regular market. You have fast onset, fast offset. It mimics the experience you would have with alcohol. I mean, that's been an amazing innovation. But to your point, or to what we were just talking about, I would love to see if they could figure out how to keep a vape working, because they just I don't know anyone who has bought a vape and actually consumed it all the way to the end of what they paid for. They clog up. There's no way to clean them. There's no way to get them to work again. You just end up throwing them away. And that's just such a waste.
There are a couple of really good brands. Avitas, or sativa spelled backwards, is my go-to. The rest of them I don't even deal with. Live resin or live rosin. But yeah, all of those. Actually, it was like a 400% increase in live rosin vape carts in 2020, which I found interesting. The perceived healthiness of a live rosin. Are you seeing similar like insights or significant financial trends that you're seeing in the cannabis industry of things? I mean, people are kind of not sheep, but they kind of move in herds. Are you seeing like a different financial trend of some sort that you're seeing for some reason in the last couple of years?
I mentioned the restructuring of the debt. I think with the rescheduling talk, that kind of bumped up a lot more private placements of equity. We've seen a bunch of those lately. And I say a bunch, it's not a whole lot, but it was more than what we were seeing. And I think because people started to feel a little more comfortable with the risk of getting involved with equity again. As you know, most of these valuations are down like 90%. And we've had a couple of bumps up where people got sucked back in and then got their hats handed to them again.
So that was the
So
reason why people went to debt, is because they were afraid of the valuations in the equity side. And so they just wanted debt.
yeah, people were just we had seen a lot of capital raises on the equity side, and that was going pretty well until the stocks fell out. So those investors went, well, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Mhm.
And so the companies were like, okay, crap, we can't sell any more stock. Okay, well, we'll do debt and we'll do like a convertible deal. So you saw that big shift to that. Then you had a few companies start to not pay their debt. So that got people nervous again. So then that dried up. And so we started to see more restructuring, a lot of that lately. And then like I said, I'm just kind of what you would say green shoots, just starting to see a few more private placements, not a lot, but just a few. And just seeing those few, though, tells me that the appetite for risk is kind of starting to get a second look because of that potential rescheduling.
So it's FOMO rather than any kind of logic.
Yeah, you got to be in it early. I mean, as you know, you can never truly pick the right moment.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, you have people that did not want to miss out, and it's so the prices were so low, and you were getting such good bargains. Why not?
Right. All right. This is when we look into your crystal ball for some predictions over the next 5 years, which is like 100 for most normal people. What impact are we going to see in the cannabis industry over the next half decade?
I think we will actually see some movement on legislation. I think if anything, we might see it around this next election cycle.
Now, is this legalization, or are you talking about safe banking? What kind of regulation?
Well,
Something
that I wouldn't know. I thought we would have seen safe banking, and then that seemed to get, kidnapped. I think rescheduling is probably going to be the safest, probably not the best word because of the SAFE Act, but has the most chance of something happening. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that tied in with the election cycle. It's interesting because from the data, cannabis legislation doesn't necessarily draw people to the voting booths. It won't make them go there. But if they are there, they will tend to vote for it. So if you're a cannabis person, it's not going to be the thing that gets you in the door. But if you're in the door and there it is on the ballot, you're going to go for it. But if that starts to become a tight race, I've heard a lot of people say they think Biden would then jump on that. He's not a very big he's not a big promoter of cannabis legislation, as we know. He's an old school guy, but he knows where the wind blows. And so I could see that he would be tying that to his thing. And plus, when you look at the old history of prohibition and alcohol, when you got X amount of states that had started to pull back on prohibition for alcohol, the whole country then flipped. And I think we're getting to that tipping point with cannabis as well. So that's why I think that rescheduling has a much better chance and ultimately will help banking. Won't solve everything, but it will help. So that's really what I see. I think we're also going to start to see more states go with the full legalization as well.
Yeah, we're going to move from 3/5 to like 4/5 of the country here pretty soon. It's going to be pretty wild.
Exactly. It just becomes a tipping point.
Yeah. All right, Debra, we covered a lot. Anything else that you want to cover or mention where people can find you at Green Market Report?
Right. So we are at www.greenmarketreport.com. We have an event coming up on November 2nd in Chicago. It's our Midwest Women in Cannabis Summit. And like I said, November 2nd, Chicago. Of course, all genders are welcome. But we're really excited about that event. And then next year, we're looking at doing a whole lot more. We've got 4 more events planned for next year. So yeah, we're really excited about 2024.
I'll have to let this gal know how to get high like a lady. She's the author. She's out there in Chicago. She made a tramp stamp for women in like PMS and stuff. So I'll have to let her know to check that out. I think she's looking for capital to try and expand. Sounds like a pretty good opportunity for her and some other people looking for something similar. So I will leave Debra's information in the show notes. You can check her out. I want to thank my guest, Debra Borchardt, co-founder and executive editor at Green Market Report. Debra, thanks again for being on the Talking Hedge.
Thanks, Josh.
Appreciate it. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out. can check out these other videos that we've got.
Thanks for listening to today's show. To check out more great cannabis podcasts, go to podconnects.com. Here's a preview of one of our other shows.
Infused, a cannabis talk show, is a one-of-a-kind look inside the cannabis industry. Meet the amazing people who make cannabis businesses bloom as they join host Nick with Francesca and Mike for creative cannabis conversations. Get an honest look at the business of cannabis, including trends, best and worst practices, products, education, and advocacy. Whether you're canna curious or running a cannabis, Infused has canna conversations that count. Infused is available on YouTube and is now streaming as part of the PodConnects network.